Ambassador Zekthera had seen many species rise and fall during his 3 centuries of diplomatic service. The tall, silver-skinned Valtharian had negotiated peace treaties between warring star systems, witnessed the birth of new civilizations, and observed the decline of ancient empires. But nothing had prepared him for humanity. The first time he encountered humans was during a routine diplomatic mission to the Outer Rim territories. His vessel, the Harmony's Edge, had been traveling through what humans called the Sol System when they received an unexpected transmission. Unknown vessel, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force. Please identify yourself and state your purpose in our space. The voice was crisp, professional, and carried an undertone that made Zekthera's scales ripple with unease. It wasn't fear exactly, but something else entirely. Confidence. Absolute, unwavering confidence from a species that had barely left their home planet. "This is Ambassador Zekthera of the Galactic Confederation," he replied through the universal translator. "We come in peace, seeking diplomatic contact with your species." There was a pause. Then, permission granted to approach Earth. "You'll be escorted by our patrol ships." What emerged from the asteroid belt shocked Zekthera to his core. The human ships were crude by galactic standards, built with primitive materials and basic fusion drives. But there was something about their design that spoke of raw functionality over elegance. These weren't ships built for exploration or trade. They were weapons, pure and simple. The escort vessels flanked his diplomatic cruiser with military precision. Each ship bristled with kinetic weaponry and missile pods. The humans, it seemed, had learned to fight before they learned to fly. As they approached the blue-green world the humans called home, Zekthera marveled at the orbital infrastructure. Massive defense platforms hung in space like mechanical moons, their weapon arrays tracking his ship's movement. For a species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago, their military preparation was extraordinary. The landing on Earth took place at a facility called Geneva. Zekthera stepped out of his shuttle and immediately felt the weight of the planet's heavy gravity. Most civilized worlds had gravitational fields around 0.7 standard, but Earth registered nearly 1.2. How did these humans function under such crushing force? Secretary General Martinez greeted him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was a small woman by human standards, but Zekthera noticed how she moved with economy and purpose. Every gesture seemed calculated, controlled. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador," she said. "We're honored by your visit." The words were diplomatic, but Zekthera's enhanced senses picked up the tension in her voice, the way her muscles remained coiled despite her relaxed posture. This was a predator trying to appear harmless. Over the following days, Zekthera toured human facilities and met with their leaders. What he saw disturbed him profoundly. These humans had turned warfare into an art form. Their military academies studied conflicts that spanned millennia. They had terms for types of combat that other species had never conceived of. Guerrilla warfare. Asymmetric tactics. Total war. But it was during a cultural exchange that Zekthera truly understood what humanity represented. He had been invited to observe a human sporting event called boxing. 2 males entered a ring and proceeded to strike each other with their bare hands until one could no longer continue. The crowd cheered with bloodthirsty enthusiasm. "Fascinating," Zekthera murmured to his guide, a human named Dr. Williams. "Your people find violence entertaining." Dr. Williams smiled. "Oh, this isn't violence, Ambassador. This is competition. We have rules, referees, medical staff. Real violence is something entirely different. I don't understand the distinction." "Watch," Dr. Williams said, pulling up a holographic display. "This is footage from what we call the Battle of Stalingrad, during our Second World War." What Zekthera saw made his blood run cold. Humans fought in conditions that would kill most species outright. They battled in sub-zero temperatures, survived on minimal food, and continued fighting even when wounded. The footage showed human soldiers charging machine gun nests, knowing they would die, simply to give their comrades a chance to advance. "They fought for months in those ruins," Dr. Williams explained. Sometimes the battle lines were just meters apart. They'd fight for single buildings, floor by floor, room by room. And, when they ran out of ammunition, they fought with knives. When the knives broke, they fought with their hands. Zekthara's translator struggled with some of the terms. The humans had dozens of words for different types of killing. They had studied death the way his people studied quantum mechanics. Why? Zekthara asked. Why continue fighting when defeat is certain? Because surrender meant the death of everything we held dear, Dr. Williams replied. Humans don't just fight for territory or resources, Ambassador. We fight for ideas. For principles. For the right to exist as we choose. That evening, Zekthara attended a dinner with Earth's military leadership. Admiral Torres, a weathered human with scars across her face, spoke candidly about humanity's expansion into space. We know we're not the strongest species out there, she said. We're not the smartest, the fastest, or the most technologically advanced. But, we have something that seems rare in the galaxy. What is that? Zekthara asked. We refuse to quit. Every other species we've encountered in the Outer Rim talks about acceptable losses, strategic retreats, negotiated surrenders. They fight until fighting becomes too expensive, then, they make deals. Admiral Torres leaned forward. Humans don't think that way. We'll burn our own worlds before we let an enemy take them. We'll fight with sticks and stones if we have to. The conversation continued, but Zekthara found himself studying the humans around the table. Each one bore the marks of their species' violent heritage. Scars, calluses, eyes that constantly scanned for threats. They had evolved on a world that tried to kill them daily, and they had not just survived but thrived. Later that night, alone in his quarters, Zekthara composed his first report to the Galactic Confederation. Subject: Initial contact with species designation human. The humans represent a unique phenomenon in galactic civilization. While technologically inferior to established powers, they demonstrate combat capabilities and psychological resilience that may pose significant challenges to galactic stability. Recommend immediate establishment of formal diplomatic relations and careful monitoring of human expansion activities. But, even as he wrote those measured words, Zekthara knew he was understating the magnitude of what he had discovered. The humans weren't just another species. They were a force of nature, a storm waiting to break across the galaxy. His next scheduled stop was the Kepler Mining Consortium, a collection of worlds in the Centauri cluster. The humans had established colonies there recently, and there had been some minor disputes over mining rights. Zekthara expected to mediate a simple territorial disagreement. He had no idea he was about to witness the true face of human warfare. The journey to Kepler Station took 3 days through hyperspace. Zekthara spent the time reviewing intelligence reports about the human colonies. Small settlements, mostly mining operations and agricultural facilities. The humans called it peaceful expansion, but Zekthara noticed that every colony ship was accompanied by at least 2 military escorts. When they dropped out of hyperspace near Kepler Prime, Zekthara's pilot immediately detected weapons fire. Ambassador, the pilot called back. There's a battle in progress. On the main display, Zekthara watched streams of plasma and kinetic rounds streak between ships. The Kepler Consortium's fleet was engaging a small group of human vessels in what appeared to be a hopeless fight. The humans were outnumbered 3-1. Open a communication channel, Zekthara ordered. All ships, this is Ambassador Zekthara of the Galactic Confederation. Cease fire immediately. The Kepler ships responded first. Ambassador, thank the void you're here. These human pirates attacked our mining operation without warning. We're acting in self-defense. A human voice cut through the static. Negative, Ambassador. The Kepler forces attacked our civilian transport. We're protecting our people. Zekthara studied the tactical display. The facts seemed clear enough. A human transport had strayed into contested space, and the Kepler Consortium had fired on it. The human military escorts had responded with force. What happened next would haunt Zekthara for the rest of his life. The human commander, identifying herself as Captain Rodriguez of the EDFS Indomitable, made a simple announcement: all civilian vessels, maintain safe distance. Military vessels, prepare for combat. The three human warships moved with purpose that defied their technological disadvantages. They didn't try to escape or call for reinforcements. Instead, they formed a defensive formation around the damaged transport and began systematically destroying the Kepler fleet. It wasn't just the tactics that shocked Zekthara. It was the absolute ruthlessness of the human attack. When a Kepler ship tried to surrender, the humans ignored the white flag protocols and continued firing until the vessel was destroyed. Captain Rodriguez, Zekthara transmitted. The Kepler vessel is attempting to surrender. Negative, Ambassador. They fired on civilians. No quarter. Zekthara's translator had to search its databases for the term no quarter. What it found made his scales stand on end. The humans had a concept called total war, where normal rules of engagement were suspended in favor of complete destruction of the enemy. The battle lasted 23 minutes. When it ended, 15 Kepler vessels had been destroyed. The humans had lost one ship and suffered damage to another, but they had achieved complete victory despite being outnumbered. The aftermath was even more disturbing. Captain Rodriguez agreed to meet with Zekthara aboard the Harmony's Edge to discuss the incident. She was younger than Zekthara had expected, with the lean build typical of spaceborne humans. But her eyes held the same predatory focus he had seen in every human he'd encountered. The Kepler forces fired on a clearly marked civilian transport, she said without preamble. Under human military doctrine, that constitutes a war crime. We responded appropriately. Appropriately? Zekthara's voice rose an octave. You destroyed their entire fleet. They attacked our people, Captain Rodriguez replied. What did you expect us to do? Zekthara realized the fundamental disconnect. To most galactic species, war was a political tool, a way to gain advantage in negotiations. You fought until the cost became too high, then you made a deal. But humans seemed to view war as something else entirely. To them, it was personal. In galactic law, Zekthara explained, proportional response is required. The Kepler consortium attacked one ship. You could have disabled their lead vessel as a warning. Captain Rodriguez studied him with those unsettling human eyes. Ambassador, let me explain something about human military philosophy. When someone attacks our civilians, we don't send warnings. We send messages. What kind of messages? The kind that ensures it never happens again. #I saw humans fight. Second document. The news of the Kepler incident spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Zekthara found himself in the uncomfortable position of defending human actions to the Galactic Confederation Council while privately questioning whether the galaxy was ready for humanity's brand of warfare. 3 months after Kepler, Zekthara received an urgent transmission from the Confederation's Military Intelligence Division. The Zephyrian Empire, one of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations, had declared war on the human colonies in the Vega system. Emperor Thexmor of the Zephyrians was a being of ancient pride and absolute authority. His empire had conquered dozens of star systems through superior technology and overwhelming force. When the humans had established colonies in what the Zephyrians considered their sphere of influence, Thexmor had demanded their immediate withdrawal. The human response had been delivered by Admiral Sarah Chen herself: the colonies stay. If you want them gone, come and take them. Zekthara arrived in the Vega system aboard the fastest diplomatic vessel the Confederation could provide, but he was already too late. The war had begun. The Zephyrian Imperial fleet was a sight to behold. 500 vessels of elegant design and devastating firepower, led by the massive dreadnought Emperor's Will. Their technology was centuries ahead of human capabilities. Their plasma weapons could punch through any armor humanity could field. Their shields could deflect anything in the human arsenal. Against this armada, the humans had assembled a defense force of barely 60 ships. Zekthara watched the opening engagement from his position at the edge of the system, his diplomatic immunity keeping him safe from the coming slaughter. The Zephyrians advanced in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready. They transmitted the standard surrender demand, offering the humans one final chance to abandon their colonies and withdraw from Zephyrian space. Admiral Chen's response came through crystal clear: "Zephyrian fleet, you are trespassing in human space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Emperor Thexmore himself answered from the bridge of the Emperor's will. His voice carried the authority of millennia. "Young species, you do not understand the forces arrayed against you. Surrender now, and we will allow your people to live as subjects of the Empire. Resist, and we will turn your worlds to ash." What happened next would become legend throughout the galaxy. Admiral Chen's voice came back, calm and steady. "Emperor Thexmore, let me explain something about humans. We don't surrender. We don't retreat. And we sure as hell don't bow to tyrants. Come and take our worlds if you can." The human fleet didn't wait for the Zephyrians to respond. They attacked immediately. But this wasn't the kind of attack any galactic power had seen before. The humans didn't engage in traditional fleet combat. Instead, they swarmed the Zephyrian formation like insects attacking a giant. Human ships dove between the massive Zephyrian vessels, using their superior maneuverability to stay inside the enemy's weapons arcs. They targeted engine blocks and weapon systems rather than trying to penetrate the heavy armor. When a human ship suffered critical damage, it didn't try to retreat. Instead, it rammed the nearest Zephyrian vessel. Zekthera watched in horror as human captain after human captain chose death over defeat. The EDFS Defiance lost its engines and main weapons but continued fighting with point defense systems until a Zephyrian plasma lance cut it in half. As the ship died, its captain detonated the fusion core, taking 2 Zephyrian cruisers with it. "Madness," Zekthera whispered. "They're committing suicide." But, as the battle continued, he began to see the method in the madness. Every human ship that died took multiple Zephyrian vessels with it. The humans were trading their lives at a ratio that favored the smaller fleet. More importantly, they were demonstrating something that shook the Zephyrian formation to its core. The humans couldn't be intimidated. Emperor Thexmore had built his empire on the assumption that smaller, weaker species would submit when faced with overwhelming force. But humans didn't think in terms of acceptable losses or strategic retreats. They fought with the fury of a cornered predator. The turning point came when Admiral Chen's flagship, the EDFS Terra's Fury, broke through the Zephyrian battle line and made a direct run at the Emperor's will. The massive dreadnought's defensive fire should have obliterated the smaller human vessel, but Chen used a tactic that no Zephyrian commander had ever encountered. She used her own ships as shields. Human vessels threw themselves between the Terra's Fury and the Zephyrian guns, absorbing the plasma fire with their hulls. Ship after ship died to protect their admiral's run, their crews singing what Zekthera later learned was called a battle hymn as they burned. When the Terra's Fury finally reached the Emperor's will, it didn't try to engage in conventional combat. Instead, Admiral Chen executed a maneuver that would be studied in military academies for centuries to come. She rammed the dreadnought. The impact sent both ships spinning through space, their hulls tangled together in a twisted embrace of metal and fire. But the Terra's Fury wasn't finished. Admiral Chen had rigged her ship's fusion core to overload on impact. The explosion that followed lit up the entire system. When the light faded, both ships were gone, and, with them, Emperor Thexmore and the heart of the Zephyrian command structure. The remaining Zephyrian fleet, leaderless and shaken, found themselves facing something they had never encountered in 1,000 years of conquest: humans who refused to quit fighting. Captain Rodriguez, who had survived the earlier engagement, now found herself in command of the human forces. She made an announcement that would echo through galactic history: "Zephyrian fleet, your emperor is dead. Your command ship is destroyed. You are outnumbered and outgunned by forces that don't know how to surrender. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from our space, or we will send you to join your emperor." It was a bluff. The humans were down to less than 20 functional ships. But the Zephyrians didn't know that, and, more importantly, they had just watched their supposedly invincible emperor die at the hands of a species that should have been conquered in the first hour of battle. the Zephyrian fleet withdrew. News of the victory spread through human space like wildfire. On Earth, in the colonies, aboard every human ship in the galaxy, people celebrated. They had faced down an empire that had conquered star systems for millennia and emerged victorious. But Zekthera felt no joy as he watched the aftermath. He understood what the galaxy was only beginning to grasp: humanity had just announced itself as a major power through the most primal method possible. They had proven that they could not be conquered, could not be intimidated, could not be stopped by conventional means. The diplomatic fallout was immediate and far-reaching. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive began reassessing their positions. Trade agreements were hastily renegotiated. Border disputes were settled in humanity's favor without argument. More disturbing were the reports coming from Zephyrian space. The Empire was collapsing. Without their emperor, the various subject species were rising in rebellion. Entire star systems were declaring independence. The Zephyrian military, shaken by their defeat, was fragmenting into warlord factions. In one battle, humanity had destabilized one of the galaxy's major powers. Zekthera requested a private meeting with Admiral Chen's replacement, Admiral Thompson, aboard the newly constructed human space station orbiting Vega Prime. The station itself was a testament to human engineering philosophy. It wasn't beautiful like Valtharian architecture or elegant like Zephyrian design. It was a fortress, bristling with weapons and built to withstand anything the galaxy could throw at it. Admiral Thompson was a veteran of the Zephyrian War, as historians were already calling it. She bore the scars of battle across her face and hands, and her eyes held the same unsettling intensity Zekthera had seen in every human warrior. "Admiral," Zekthera began carefully, "I must ask about human military doctrine. Your species seems to approach warfare differently than any other civilization." Thompson nodded. "How so?" "Other species fight for territory, resources, political advantage. They fight until the cost becomes too high, then they negotiate. But humans seem to fight for different reasons." "We fight for survival," Thompson said simply. "Not just physical survival, but the survival of our way of life, our values, our right to exist as free beings." "But surely there are limits? Lines you won't cross?" Thompson's expression grew cold. "Ambassador, let me tell you about human history. We've fought wars that lasted decades. We've battled in conditions that would kill most species. We've endured sieges, plagues, famines, and still kept fighting. When the Germans bombed London, the British didn't surrender. They kept fighting. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, the Americans didn't negotiate. They built the biggest war machine in history and fought until Japan was ash." Zekthera's translator struggled with the historical references, but the meaning was clear. "We have a saying," Thompson continued. "Victory at any cost. Because for humans, defeat doesn't mean losing territory or paying reparations. Defeat means the end of everything we are." "And what about the cost to the galaxy? The Zephyrian Empire is collapsing. Millions of beings are dying in the chaos that followed your victory." Thompson studied him with those predatory eyes. "Ambassador, the Zephyrians chose war when they demanded our surrender. They chose the path of conquest when they built their empire. The consequences of their choices are not our responsibility. But surely you feel some obligation to maintain galactic stability?" "Our obligation is to our own people first," Thompson replied. "We'll work with other species when it serves mutual interests. We'll trade, negotiate, even fight alongside former enemies when necessary. But we will never again submit to the will of those who would enslave us." That night, alone in his quarters, Zekthera composed his second major report to the Galactic Confederation, subject: Human Military Capabilities, Revised Assessment *. Previous estimates of human military potential were severely understated. While technologically inferior to major galactic powers, human tactical flexibility and psychological resistance to defeat make them effectively unconquerable by conventional means. *. The Zephyrian War has demonstrated that humans do not fight according to accepted galactic conventions. They appear willing to accept casualties and inflict destruction at levels that destabilize entire regions. Recommend immediate revision of all military contingency plans involving human space. Traditional pressure tactics and shows of force are not only ineffective against this species but may actually provoke disproportionate responses. But even as he filed his report, Zekthera knew the galaxy's leaders wouldn't understand. They would read about human tactics and strategic thinking, but they wouldn't grasp the fundamental truth he had discovered. Humanity wasn't just another species with unusual military capabilities. They were apex predators who had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. They had learned to fight not just for victory, but for the right to exist. And now they were loose in a galaxy that had forgotten what real warfare looked like. #I saw humans fight. Third document. 2 years after the Zephyrian War, Zekthera thought he understood humans. He had seen their capacity for violence, their refusal to surrender, their willingness to die for abstract concepts like freedom and honor. But he was about to learn that he had only witnessed the surface of humanity's true nature. The crisis began in the Andromeda periphery, where an ancient enemy had awakened. The Devourers were a nightmare from the galaxy's distant past. Machine entities that consumed organic matter to fuel their expansion, they had been dormant for millennia. When deep space miners accidentally triggered their reactivation protocols, the machines began their inexorable advance toward populated space. The Galactic Confederation's response was swift but inadequate. The combined fleets of a dozen species engaged the Devourer swarm at the edge of the Helix Nebula. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended in complete disaster. 60% of the galactic fleet was destroyed, and the Devourers continued their advance without slowing. Emergency sessions of the Galactic Council produced nothing but panic and recriminations. Species after species announced their intention to evacuate their border worlds and fall back to more defensible positions. Some suggested negotiating with the machines, though no one could explain how to communicate with entities that showed no interest in anything but consumption. It was during the fourth emergency session that Admiral Thompson made an unexpected appearance. The human representative requested permission to address the council, and, despite objections from several member species, was granted 5 minutes to speak. Honorable delegates, Thompson began, the human government has reviewed the tactical situation regarding the Devourer threat. We are prepared to offer our assistance. The Kthari representative, an insectoid being whose species had lost 3 colonies to the machines, clicked his mandibles in what Zekthera recognized as bitter laughter. With respect, Admiral, your entire fleet numbers fewer than 100 ships. The Devourers destroyed 600 vessels without suffering significant losses. What assistance could humans possibly provide? Thompson's expression didn't change. We're offering to hold the line while the rest of the galaxy evacuates. The council chamber fell silent. Zekthera felt his scales ripple with shock. The humans were volunteering for a suicide mission. Admiral, Zekthera said carefully, you understand that current projections indicate the Devourer swarm will reach the inner systems within 43 days. Our military analysts believe it would take at least 200 days to complete evacuation of the affected populations. Understood, Thompson replied. We'll buy you the time you need. The Valtharian counselor, Zekthera's own superior, leaned forward. How exactly do you propose to delay an enemy that has proven immune to our most advanced weapons? Thompson smiled, and, for the first time, Zekthera saw something genuinely terrifying in that expression. We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to make them pay for every inch. The human plan was audacious to the point of insanity. Rather than engage the Devourers in traditional fleet combat, they would use guerrilla tactics on an interstellar scale. Human ships would harry the machine advance, striking supply lines and support vessels before melting back into the void. They would turn every asteroid, every derelict station, every piece of space debris into a potential weapon. Most importantly, they would make the machines come to them on ground of humanity's choosing. The fortress world of Thermopylae had been under construction for 6 months, ever since intelligence reports suggested the Devourers might eventually reach human space. Built into a massive asteroid at the mouth of the only hyperspace lane leading to the core systems, it was designed with one purpose, to be utterly impassable. Zekthera arrived at Thermopylae 3 days before the Devourers were expected to reach the system. What he saw defied his understanding of military engineering. The humans had turned the entire asteroid into a weapon. Kinetic cannons capable of accelerating projectiles to significant fractions of lightspeed dotted the surface like metallic flowers. Missile batteries were built into every available crater. The interior had been honeycombed with tunnels and defensive positions that could be held independently even if the surface fell. But it was the human defenders themselves that truly amazed Zekthera. They had come from across human space. Marines from Earth, colonial militia from the frontier worlds, fleet personnel from ships that had been damaged beyond repair. Some were veterans of the Zephyrian War, bearing scars from that conflict. Others were young volunteers who had never seen combat but refused to let others fight alone. General Martinez, the daughter of the former Secretary General, commanded the defense. She was a small woman like her mother, but she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had already accepted death and found peace with it. "Ambassador," she said when Zekthera arrived at the command center, "I'm surprised to see you here. The Confederation fleet pulled back 2 days ago." "I requested permission to stay," Zekthera replied. "As an observer." Martinez nodded. "Then, you'll witness something that's never been tried before. We're going to hold this position against impossible odds, and we're going to make the machines remember why organic life has survived this long." The Devourer swarm arrived exactly on schedule. Zekthera watched from the observation deck as thousands of mechanical ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. The machines were perfect geometric forms of black metal and pulsing energy, completely alien to the organic curves favored by most galactic species. The machine probe units immediately began scanning Thermopylae's defenses. What they found seemed to confuse them. The asteroid fortress was too small to house a significant military force, but its weapon signatures indicated firepower levels normally associated with a fleet. General Martinez opened communications with the machine collective. "Devourer forces, this is General Martinez of the Human Defense Corps. You are not welcome in this system. Turn back now, or we will destroy you." The machine response came in perfectly modulated synthetic speech. "Biological entities detected. Compliance is required. Stand down or face termination." Martinez's laugh echoed through the command center. "Machine Collective, let me explain something about humans. We don't stand down. We don't comply. And we sure as hell don't fear termination. Come and take our world if you can." The Devourer assault began immediately. Wave after wave of machine fighters screamed toward the asteroid fortress, their weapons carving geometric patterns of destruction across space. The humans responded with a wall of fire that lit up the entire system. But this wasn't like the battle with the Zephyrians. The Devourers felt no fear, experienced no morale failures, suffered no confusion when their command ships were destroyed. They simply kept coming, wave after wave, adapting their tactics with mechanical precision. For 7 days, the battle raged without pause. Human defensive positions were overrun and retaken, lost and recaptured in a constant cycle of violence. The machines pressed closer to the fortress with each attack, their superior numbers gradually wearing down the human defenses. Zekthera found himself trapped in the command bunker as machine boarding parties breached the outer perimeter. Around him, human soldiers fought with weapons, tools, and, finally, their bare hands against mechanical entities that felt no pain and knew no mercy. It was in those tunnels, watching humans die meter by meter to buy a few more minutes of time, that Zekthera finally understood what made this species unique. They were fighting for more than territory or resources. They were fighting for the concept of biological life itself. Every human who died in those tunnels was making a statement that organic consciousness had value, that it was worth preserving at any cost. On the 8th day, with defensive lines collapsing and ammunition running low, General Martinez made a final transmission to the Galactic Confederation. "This is General Martinez, Thermopylae Defense Force. We have delayed the Devourer advance for 7 days and 18 hours. Our position is no longer tenable. We estimate the machines have lost 40% of their assault fleet. Remember what we've shown you here. Organic life is worth fighting for. Martinez out." What happened next would become the subject of legends throughout the galaxy. Rather than surrender or attempt evacuation, the humans detonated the fortress. They had rigged the entire asteroid with fusion charges, turning Thermopylae itself into a weapon. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away, a brief new star that took nearly half the Devourer swarm with it into oblivion. But, even more importantly, the sacrifice at Thermopylae had given the galaxy something it had lost: hope. Species across the galaxy had watched the human defense through newsfeeds and military broadcasts. They had seen a relatively primitive species stand against impossible odds and inflict devastating losses on an enemy that had seemed invincible. The Cthari were the first to reverse their evacuation orders. If humans could fight machines to a standstill, then, perhaps the Devourers could be defeated. The Valtharian fleet, which had been falling back toward the core systems, turned around and began harassing the weakened machine forces. Within days, the retreat had become a counterattack. Species that had been fleeing in terror began coordinating strikes against the damaged Devourer formations. The machines, designed to face panicked evacuation fleets, suddenly found themselves fighting a galaxy that had remembered how to be angry. The war lasted another 8 months, but the outcome was never really in doubt after Thermopylae. The machines were systematically hunted down and destroyed, their technology studied, and their threat eliminated. But the real victory wasn't military. It was philosophical. In his final report to the Galactic Confederation, Zekthera wrote, "The human species has fundamentally altered the strategic landscape of our galaxy. Not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through the demonstration that some things are worth dying for." Before Thermopylae, galactic civilization was built on the assumption that survival was the highest virtue, that any cost was acceptable if it meant preserving life. The humans have shown us a different path. They have proven that the manner of one's existence matters more than its mere continuation. This species will never be conquered because they cannot be made to value their lives above their principles. They have shown the galaxy that freedom, dignity, and self-determination are worth any sacrifice. I believe we are witnessing the emergence of a new type of civilization, one that will either elevate the galaxy to heights we cannot imagine or burn it all to ash in pursuit of impossible ideals. I pray we are wise enough to choose elevation. Years later, as Zekthera observed the transformation of galactic society, he realized that humanity's greatest victory hadn't been military at all. They had infected the galaxy with something more dangerous than any weapon: the idea that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of cost. Species that had lived for millennia under the heel of stronger powers began demanding their freedom. Ancient empires found their subject peoples rising in rebellion, inspired by the human example. The old order, based on submission to superior force, was crumbling. In its place, something new was emerging. A galactic civilization based not on the dominance of the strong over the weak, but on the principle that all sentient beings had the right to determine their own destiny. It wasn't a peaceful transformation. Wars raged across the galaxy as the old powers fought to maintain their control. But the outcome was inevitable. Once the idea of freedom had taken root, no force in the universe could stop its spread. Zekthera often wondered if the humans understood what they had unleashed. In teaching the galaxy to fight for principles rather than mere survival, they had guaranteed that the universe would never know peace again. But, perhaps, he thought, as he watched former slave species establishing their own governments and writing their own constitutions, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. The humans had shown them all something that had been forgotten in millennia of careful, calculated existence, that some things were worth the risk of everything. And, in doing so, they had saved not just themselves, but the very concept of what it meant to be free.